Welcome to the Canadian Guild of Stage Directors and Choreographers podcast channel. My name is Jen Thiessen.
And I'm Kyla Musselman, and we'll be here to guide you through these episodes, which are made possible thanks to Canada Council for the Arts.
The Canadian Guild of Stage Directors and Choreographers, CGDC, is a national arts service organisation advocating for the rights, interests and protection of stage directors and choreographers and their assistants and associates.
These first episodes are snippets from our Assistant and Associate Program series, featuring industry leaders with insight about the theatre creation process, shared with you with the hopes of enriching our community.
In today's episode, we demystify grant writing and producing with Laura Piccinin and Stephanie Graham. All right, my amazing friends, we have a lady who truly needs no introduction, but we're going to give it to her. Stephanie Graham is an award-winning choreographer, director, artistic leader, and educator whose work has been seen across Canada. Her credits include the Globe Theatre, Neptune Theatre, Theatre Aquarius, Tuts, Musical Stage Co, and more. Currently, she is choreographing Dirty Rotten Scoundrels at the Stratford Festival of Canada, and next she will direct and choreograph Legally Blonde at Theatre Calgary and the Citadel Theatre. Stephanie is an avid educator, having been on the faculty at Sheridan College, George Brown College, Randolph, and Queen's University, and she is here to school us today. She is the associate producer at Torrent Productions, and of course is a founding member of CGDC. We wouldn't be here without her today. So that is the brilliant Stephanie Graham. Hi, Steph.
Hello, everybody. So glad to be here.
Oh, what a legend. We are also here with the brilliant Laura Piccinin today. Laura is a performer, playwright, comedian, and educator. Laura's career spans from aerial acrobatics at Tokyo Disney to writing and starring in Canadian musicals like Every Silver Lining. Laura is also known for her solo shows, which are called Let's Be Honest, Go, and The Suicide Key. She also holds degrees in psychology and received education from St. Francis Xavier University and the University of Toronto. Laura is a prolific grant writer who was originally recommended to me by the brilliant Greg Carruthers over at Everybody on Stage and has helped us receive several grants for CGDC. Quite literally, we wouldn't be here without her either today. So hello Laura, how are you?
Hi, everyone. Thank you. That was a very nice intro.
They need to hear who they're learning from today. Some brilliant women. We are just going to jump right in. Steph, as a director, choreographer, and a producer, can you tell us, in your opinion, how important is self-funding as a creator?
I think it's essential. I think it's essential as a director and a choreographer for you to self-produce or self-fund. And I have three sort of reasons why, and then I'll expand on them. I think number one, it makes you a better collaborator. The more you know, the more you can be a better collaborator. Number two, you might have this burning idea that you just can't get out of your head. And I think learning how to self-fund will help you realize that idea. And I think number three, it fosters critical skills as a emerging director and choreographer. So number one, being a better collaborator. The act of trying to be a producer or self-produce, as you sit down and make those budgets, you learn how to negotiate the equity agreements that actors work under, ADC agreements that designers work under, musicians agreements. You learn how much marketing costs. You learn how much a printing costs. So when you are directing and choreographing a show, you have more knowledge of what things cost, because at the end of the day, theater costs money. So you will understand why a theater cannot build you two versions of something as a director for then you look at both those versions and then you decide. You're going to have to learn how to back up those decisions earlier in your creative process so that you can work with the team. You can work with the TD and the PM. These are really, really critical skills to learn. You also have a deeper understanding of the creative process and how long that creative process takes. I think it's really important as an emerging director and choreographer to understand that. Number two, this burning idea that you have, writing grants or searching for funding or sitting down with a producer, you will start to distill and be able to articulate the why. So why this project, why at this time? Because those questions on the grants, and again, if you're sitting down with a producer, you are going to have to articulate your idea. And I think it's really important to be able to do that as an artist, and especially a director. If you want to pitch your idea to an artistic director, you have to articulate the why. It also gives you a bit of creative control. If you, again, want to just get this idea out there, I know artistic director is biting at your idea, but you feel so strongly about it, being able to self-fund may allow you to do that. And then also it teaches you, I think, working on a schedule. So if you know that you have this burning idea and you will learn how far in advance that grant has to be in, you have to set dates and you have to meet those dates, which I think is another critical skill. And the final thing, critical skills, I think it fosters problem solving, looking at obstacles as opportunities. As an emerging director choreographer, you're going to hit those obstacles and how much you need to figure out how to solve it. It makes you resourceful. And also leadership. I think learning how to self-fund and self-produce helps with leadership skills, which directors and choreographers, you have to have those skills. So I think it's essential if you're emerging to start thinking about these things.
Laura,
I'm ready.
Can you tell us what are some examples of grant funding bodies?
Great. Well, as you might know, there are usually 3 levels of grant funding. We have the CCA, the Canada Council for the Arts, which is our national funding. Then you have the Ontario Arts Council, but you'll also have another provincial arts council as well, usually across Canada. I believe the same with the territories. You know what? I should check that. Oh, good. A nod. Yes, and the territories. And then there's sometimes a municipal one as well. So we have Toronto Arts Council here in Toronto. And all 3 grant bodies, they kind of follow a similar pattern. I think the one with the most money and the furthest reach, both in the dynamics of the grants that you are able to apply for, is the national one, the Canada Council for the Arts. I would focus primarily there, especially I find the interface the easiest to use, and it's also just the most broad. If we're going for broad, that's the one. Then your provincial one, the Ontario Arts Council, BC is also another one that I would just not do. I said that so quickly, but the BC Arts Council has, the questions are unbelievable. It's very frustrating. And at the provincial level, a lot of times what we're running into is a lot of people writing for grants and not as much funding. And so that level has that one issue. The lower level, the municipal level, has usually fewer people writing. Toronto is a little bit of an exception there. Usually fewer people writing, but it also has the least amount of funding, but the balance is a little bit better there. But within those 3 pillars or tiers, there's room for individual grants, there's room for professional development grants, there's room for presentational grants, there's room for creative grants. In the Canada Council especially, there's a lot of interesting things like public outreach, or the sector innovation and development, which is the grant we wrote for this program, which are more about the industry as a whole versus you as an independent artist. So this is what I mean when I'm going to talk about like the broad spectrum of what the CCA, Canada Council for the Arts, is allows. It's really a lot of different stuff. And within these grant bodies, you can have an individual profile, a group profile, or an ad hoc. Group and ad hoc are the same, or a not-for-profit profile. Not all of the levels have all of those distinctions, but they all have some of those distinctions. Then within some of the lower tiers, you have divisions within different disciplines, dance, theater, things like that. And so you have all these kind of, like it's a puzzle piece. So it's worth taking a glance at all 3. If you're going to if you're feeling overwhelmed, go for Canada Council. It's the easiest one to understand because it's so broad. You don't have to try and figure out where your work fits, especially if it's interdisciplinary. I would start there. Is that a good introduction?
Brilliant introduction. And I just have to remark as well how lucky we are as Canadians to have so many places to go to for funding for the arts. So where have you found the most success with grant writing?
Yeah, Canada Council. It's the easiest types of grants to write, and they have the most funding, and they're the most responsive.
to questions. And this is one of the main things, one of the biggest takeaways I think from all of this is when you're writing a grant, feel free to write to the officer that is responsible for that grant. It's very easy to find on the website. They usually respond within 2 to 3 days. And they're very happy to either call you on the phone or do an email and actually go over things like your budget, like your support material. They won't review your grant the same way that me or another grant writer would do. They don't really have the time for that, but use that resource. They will not give feedback on a grant that has been submitted, but they will give detailed feedback or advice on a grant that hasn't been submitted. And especially if you're questioning where should the grant go, under which category, will it be eligible? That's a big thing, whether the grant will be eligible. They are very very responsive. And so I would lean towards that. The exceptions, the major exceptions that I would say are Toronto specifically has grants within the communities, grants within that are there are some that are like outdoors, library specific, community specific. Those ones, if you're really falling into that niche that the grant is speaking to, that's really where you should go because it's a smaller pool. Then with Ontario, the two that I would make the exception for, I would stay not away, but there's a lot of charts. It's an overwhelming interface, and it is a lot of questions that are almost asking the exact same question, and it becomes frustrating because you think you've answered that already, and they say don't repeat yourself, and you feel stuck. They decide on priority groups, and within that structure of priority groups, they're very they're very sure that they want projects from those priority groups. So whereas Canada Council and Toronto Arts Council will use those priority groups if you are a member of those priority groups or if your work represents members of that priority group, it will boost your application. Ontario Arts Council has that kind of embedded in the structure of their assessment. So Ontario Arts Council, even though it seems like it's optional to be part of the priority group that they're highlighting, it is very, very unlikely unless you yourself are a member of that priority group, not just representing or bringing on members of that group, but you yourself, the applicant. It's unlikely that your score is going to be high enough because of the competition to reach that threshold. Doesn't mean don't do it. It's just a thought. But back to the exceptions. Professional development grant for OAC, Ontario Arts Council, and the micro grants, the recommender grants that come out every fall into the winter. Those are my two major exceptions for Ontario Arts Council. And it might be the same for other provincials, I'm not sure. But those are the ones to go for.
We were kind of remarking before we got on today that sometimes even as CGDC we might receive emails from artists being like, can you help fund us? I just got this job. And at that stage, it's too late. No, we can't help you fund at that stage. You need to have thought about it earlier. So can you help us with this, Steph? For budding directors or choreographers, how proactive do you have to be? What does that look like? And what are the advantages of being proactive about self-funding or funding in general?
And I mean, with the grant deadlines, it's 6 months to a year ahead of when you think that project's going to happen. So I think that helps you think about your schedule. I think it helps you think about planning. And those critical skills of we're sitting down with a designer, 6 months before the production goes into rehearsal. It just helps you get on that. Your ideas have to start to formulate sooner. You cannot wait until the week before you start rehearsal to figure out what you want to do with the set. So I think, again, it's just critical skills that you're going to have to start to develop to help you do that. I think the advantage is you find out sooner with those grants, if you're not successful, how you're going to self-fund that project, and you have to start to find other avenues. So that's nice with that. I think it's just really important to start thinking as actors, and I know many people in this room are actors as well, and our timeline is much shorter than a director choreographer. We actually were having this conversation today, that sometimes those jobs are coming 18 months to a year before, and then those design deadlines are maybe again 6 months before you even start rehearsals. So you got to think ahead.
So good. And I think as an artist as well, all of that just like forces me to look at my goals in advance. If I want to be a choreographer, I have to get the money to do it. So then I have to put it into writing. I have to find those funds, and then I can pitch it to somebody and move forward with those goals. Okay, so then as a producer, can you tell us about some things that you have self-produced, and how did your ability to self-produce enhance the success of any project?
I think the more you do it, the better you get at it, like anything. But I started out doing benefits and fundraisers for charities that I felt really passionate about. And I learned how to fill out equity contracts and figure out how to fund the insurance payments that I had to pay, and and get sponsors or a silent auction. I think that stuff was really formative for me at the beginning. And then I went on to produce 2 fringe shows, and with our company Torrent Productions, done 5 holiday family shows. And then over the pandemic, I did a digital dance project, several of them. But obviously with Sarah Obrecht, the amazing Sarah Obrecht with Theater Making Movement, we've done 2 symposiums, and we're working on some other new stuff right now. But yes, so obviously, being successful at grants, you can't always count on them. You hope and pray that some of that money comes through, but then you have to find alternative options. But looking to people you already have relationships with. So the pet store that you always buy your pet food from, or the coffee shop, maybe they'll take an ad in your program, or in-kind donations. In-kind donations, it's maybe there's a hardware store that you always go to that is willing to donate a piece of plywood for your set. I think you have to use the context that you have. Crowdfunding, there's lots of other ways to fund your project.
So I hope everyone has their pen and papers today, because it's such good information. And just listening to Steph, it totally reminds me that, like, as self-employed artists, sometimes we focus on the art, and I'm going to dance class, or I'm teaching dance class, or I'm choreographing something. But the business side, it's like, hello, it's just as important, it's just as important, or if not more important. So all of this is just so valuable. So thank you, Steph. Okay, Laura, now that we've established, you can all see what we're doing here today with these 2 lovely ladies. So now that we've established that grant writing and self-funding is essential, Laura, tell us more about grants. Give us all the info. What components, if I'm writing a grant, what components make a strong application? For example, understanding the criteria and the categories and applying correctly help guide us into a successful grant for some artists.
Okay. So as we were talking about the different grants, the professional development, the creation, and then the realization, these are words that show up in the Canada Council. I will kind of gear my answers towards that because I think it's the most applicable to everyone. You want to pick the correct category. Yes, this is an easy thing to do because you can just email them and say, does this project work in this category? And they will say yes or no. That's the eligibility. And so when you write a grant, 2 things happen. You submit it, and then within the first month or 2, depending on how they're doing, they'll decide whether it's eligible or not. And that's the person who works for the Canada Council. Later on, a couple months later, a jury will decide who gets the grants, and those people are a jury of your peers. They're artists from any kind of discipline. So just keep that in mind, in the pocket, that there's 2 people: the officer who runs the funding in each category, and then the jurors who decide who gets that funding from the eligible pool, who are your peers. So going back about the eligibility, one of the things that's really important after you've decided where your grant goes is the details. And Steph was talking about this, and it's perfect. It's exactly what you need, is just as many details as possible. You want to show the person who's reading the grant that you know what you're talking about and that you've considered every angle of, if you go in and you're producing a theater show and for some reason you don't have a stage manager allocated, or for some reason you didn't put in a rehearsal venue cost, things, if it doesn't look like you know how to do it, then they're not going to have the confidence that you can. one of the interesting things about all the grants in general is that once they give you the money, they kind of just wave you goodbye. They don't ask for receipts. They ask for a final report, but it doesn't include anything but your word. What did you do with this grant? I did this. And they go, okay. And so they're front loading a lot of that risk by saying, who do we think is going to take this money and do the thing they said they're going to do in a way that makes sense? We don't want to, we're limited in our funds. We don't want to say, well, I'm sure they meant to put a stage manager. You don't, there's no room for that. The competition is so high. Everyone in Canada is so unbelievably talented. You really have to be detailed in your budget and then make sure that the budget matches. There's a question about timeline. What are you going to do and when? You want to make sure those things match. So all of the details make sure that within the questions, the big body questions of the grants, you're getting out all of the information that explains the who, what, when, where, why. I am always surprised when I talk to a new client and I say, okay, tell me about your project. And they tell me these beautiful things about their feelings and where the idea came from and all this stuff. But they don't know the questions who, what, when, where, and why. You need those foundational, and the person reading it needs to understand exactly what you're doing. You don't need to know the who so much as in every single member of the cast or who the stage manager or who the lighting designer. Those extras are wonderful to have. It adds to the detail, your preparation of the project and things like that. But more about who could you need on this project? What is the scope of this project? So answering those things right off the bat, and that's why they kind of make you write one single sentence, like distill this whole thing down in one sentence. That's perfect. That's such a great test. Do you know what you're talking about? Do you know what your own project is? Because sometimes we think we do, but it's really difficult to communicate. And so going into all those questions and really filling out the details and going back to this idea that the jurors are interdisciplinary. So I'll use the example, you might be a circus artist who one of your three jurors is a 70-year-old pianist from Calgary, and he has no idea what you're talking about. Hair hanging, aerialist, a puller. You need to explain yourself in these grants. Try not to use jargon that's very specific to your niche because they're not going to know what you're talking about. And a member who doesn't know what you're talking about isn't going to be confident that you know what you're talking about. And while they may go above and beyond and look these things up, it's your job to explain to them what it is you're doing, why it's important to you and to the industry as a whole. So just taking the time to really think about those very specific details. You can get a little flowery with your language. I've gone back and forth between being very stoic in my take, in the grants, being very meticulous about what's what. And then every once in a while, I'll throw in a little bit of flowery language, about my hopes and dreams. There's room for all of that because, again, you're speaking to humans at the end of the day. And your approach on one day might be completely effective or not on another day. That's the kind of thing that makes the grants both fair and frustrating. So when Rowan, I believe, was saying he has a 5%, that's amazing. A 5% success rate. I know it sounds, I know, I'm sorry. But at the same time, if you're having any success, you're doing the right thing. You're on the right track. But it's fair because it's your peers, but it's also unfair because maybe they don't understand your tone. Maybe they don't understand your project. Maybe they don't like your project and they like someone else's a little bit better. And the competition is so tight that tiny little difference is the difference between you getting $50,000 and you not getting $50,000, which, yep, that does not feel good. But when you get the $50,000, that does feel good. And so, and that's what keeps you going, And to that point about the success rate, you kind of have to think about these grants in this very long-term plan. Don't just write one grant and give up. You will not get it and you will want to give up. You really have to plan for this long game. It's like auditioning. You submit to 10, you get one audition. You go to 10 auditions, you get one job if you're lucky. Right? And when you go to audition, it has almost nothing to do about whether you're good at this or not. and you have to temper your expectations to the failure rate is so high. But if you do these things long term, little bits at a time, all the time, send it off, stop caring about it. It's very difficult to do that because you think you've put together the perfect application and it's $50,000 and you need it so badly, and you need it so badly, and then you don't get it, but you got to let it go. Write another grant, let that one go, another grant, because then at some point you will get a chunk of change, and that can front load the cost of your next project. As like I said, because they don't ask for any receipts, you can do with the money what you will. And a lot of that is going towards your project, of course, but because you're paying yourself an artist fee in these projects, you can use that artist fee money to bump the next project. So you're always looking to take one and bump it, take another and bump it. And so that when you don't get grants, it's not devastating. Last thing I'll say on this kind of thing is if you're brand new to grant writing in general, or intimidated by the process, or just getting started, go ahead and open a profile on Canada Council, pick a grant and write it. Write to a project you don't even have yet. Just practice. Practice what it takes to write the budget. Practice what it takes to, like Steph was saying, which is so brilliant, figuring out what the contracts are saying for the different unions and the different prices, and figure that out. Figure out what it takes to fill in all those answers. Send it off. A PD grant is perfect. They have them, both Canada Council and Ontario Arts Council, with varying deadlines, but you could always use professional development. Dream it up. What could you possibly want? Same with the creation grants. They're not about product. They're about what you're going to create. So you don't have to worry about a concept to realization requires some sort of public presentation, but the research and creation grant doesn't. It's all about what you're doing. So go in, open those grants, and start dreaming. Dream about something that's not even a thing yet. That way you're getting practice on these grants without the heavy weight of the success or failure. Get it in, forget about it. When it comes back and you didn't get it, next time. But you know what you've set yourself up for? The first 1,000 words of almost every project is the same answer to the next question. It's who are you, what are you doing, and what's your background, what's your capability of completing these projects. That little bit about yourself, the way you communicate that, is transferable. Same with once you write the first budget, now you have all the line items and it moves on to the next. The first couple grants in each category are the most difficult, and then every one after that is like copy paste, change the date, send it off. You really need to start practicing with things you don't care about, so that by the time something comes along that you really need funding for, it feels different, and maybe you've had some success in the past that you can bounce that off of.
Mm. That's so good. And just tying everything in together for all of this, I mean, what Laura is talking about is not just grant writing as well. It's applications, for example, for this program, for the CGDC Assistant and Associates program. There is a lot of things in there that is very similar to a grant, asking artists there who, what, when, where, why, knowing that about ourselves, knowing what's important for us and why we want to have that funding only strengthens all of these applications for any program you're doing, whether it be the SDC, whether it's for us, or whether it's for a grant themselves. So all of this is so brilliant and so important. And we're going to head over to Steph. What are some other avenues outside of granting that we can use to help us gain financial support?
Yeah, obviously grants, use your connections. I'll just give an example that I've given before. I wanted to do a benefit and fundraiser, and you always pay insurance for the equity artists that are included in that benefit. And I didn't know how to pay for it, and I didn't really want it to come out of the money that we were going to be able to give to the charity at the end. So I phoned up my insurance company and I asked them, and they said yes. They wrote me a check. And so I got the insurance. It was a cold call. But I thought, how much do I pay them every year in insurance for my apartment and for my car? Maybe they would do it, and they did. So I was that cold call. Don't be afraid of it. It's scary, but use your connections. In-kind donations, I mentioned. Corporate donations are really difficult unless you're a not-for-profit charity. They won't really touch you. So you would have to go down that road if your company is a not-for-profit charity. That's when corporations can start to be involved. Same thing with banks. It's really hard. But I think if you're a smaller project, use your connections. I've said this before, but you know, are you going to sell, if you're self-producing, sell cookies and water at intermission? You know, maybe there's a bakery that you always go to. Would they donate a few dozen cookies that you can sell for $2 or $3 at intermission? And that actually adds up. Like, it adds up a lot to maybe that pays for your program printing. So there's lots of different smaller ways to think about these things, but be creative in it. And crowdfunding, of course, which I said.
Okay, so Laura, as we're going into the digital age, and as we were saying earlier, we're not just talking about specifically for grants, but also for applications such as any of these programs that help benefit artists. Can you tell us about your opinion on AI? So what are your thoughts on using AI? Should we use it as a base and personalize it from there? Give us your insights.
Okay, I have thought about this a little bit because, I'm in principle against AI, but you know what? It's a tool that if you want to use it, is there for you to use. And what I will say is that when I help people with grants, one of the top things I'm helping with is communicating an idea into writing into the form of the grant. So many artists, this is not an accessible format for them. It's more like taxes than like artistry. And so a lot of the people I work with, I simply interview them and type in the answers for them. They have the words, but they don't know how to put it into the format. And that's the most common problem, next to the interface being overwhelming and they sign on and they go, no, and they leave. But what AI can offer you is that little bridge between you have thoughts and can't get them into words, in the proper way, especially because there will be a question. The grant will ask a question, but then it'll have like little sub questions underneath. And that can get overwhelming pretty fast because it's like some of them aren't applicable to you. Some of them are sort of, and then it takes you on a little bit of a tangent. It's hard to really nail all of those things. And so AI is an excellent tool for like getting in all those criteria and then shooting out an answer. Now, again, going back to reminding ourselves that the jurors are human, and we kind of know with our experience with AI so far that when you read something that's AI, you're like, this isn't right. And there's a feeling towards that. So just remember when you're using AI to go back in and edit it and make it human again. And use that template. It's totally fine to do that, but you have to bring it back to you as a person and you as an artist. And because AI cannot take on the why of a project. It can do the who, what, when, where, but the compelling part of your artistic work is the why, and the kind of why now, which is a very creative and interesting question. Why now? Not just because you had the idea to do it now. That's an interesting take, but why right now in this world? Why did you develop this piece not necessarily why does it benefit the others, but why you in your journey? Why is this your project now? And so don't forget about that aspect of it. Also, AI is not going to be that helpful for the budget, except maybe to help look up like average costs of things. But really, in the budget, you kind of want to have at least an example of who you might use, even if you don't use that company or that person, get an actual quote from somebody specific, even if that's not what you do. And just speaking to that one last time, you can write a grant and send it off. And if you get the money, you don't have to take it. So you can write a crazy grant that you have no intention of doing, or you do have an intention and then you change your mind. You don't have to accept the money. The other thing is you can write an entire budget, and as long as the numbers match with your final report, it's more or less going to be okay. You have some flexibility. Let's say you think you're only going to have 10 artists, but actually you have 8. But then, another cost, like the venue actually costs more than you thought. Those numbers don't need to be static. You don't have to go crazy trying to figure out what is true. You just have to write what is possible, what the parameters of what you need are. So there's flexibility in that as well.
Before we move into advice and tips and tricks, I just was wondering, Steph, if you wanted to speak to anything specific that might be a mistake when writing a specific application that comes to mind for you.
I think it's just articulating the why. And I think it's really hard for us as artists sometimes to do that. because we think in creative terms, but really being able to distill it down and articulate your why. Why this thing now? Why this training for professional development? Why this training now? Really trying to distill those things down and articulate your ideas is a really great skill to be able to do.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, Laura, can you give us some advice, tips or tricks for aspiring directors, choreographers, artists who want to self-fund? Give us your hot tips, babes.
Again, the granting should be a long-term goal. If you already have a project in mind, it's too late. You want to fund things before they exist. In a way, unfortunately, especially now, CCA has just extended their timeline. I think they crunched it back down, but it's a 6 month to an 8 month process to hear back, which means you have to have written the grant and then submitted it. So you're looking at, like Steph was saying, almost a whole year. So you need to restructure your concept of grant writing in terms of long-term goals. I can't stress this enough. It's extremely difficult, which is why maybe grant writing is not for you, and that is okay. But before you quit, commit yourself to doing it for a year. Commit yourself to at all times be working on a grant for something. CCA has much more flexible deadlines that while they do have deadlines, but it only really means that you'll get your results by this certain date. You can almost always submit a CCA grant. They're rolling, rolling, rolling. So get it into your head, this idea that you're just going to always be doing some grants. That way the funding comes in trickling over time and you're not, 0 to 100. It's just not going to work. That's where you need to supplement it with all the other funding that Steph's been talking about, because it's just really not feasible to rely on the granting system. It's also annoying that you could get a grant and then another grant and then not get the third one, even if it's the exact same project that you're funding 3 years in a row. Because remember, it's not the same jury every time. It's going to be a different mix every single time. And to that same point, don't be discouraged. If you don't get the grant, the jury's going to change. You can submit the exact same words with the date changed to the next year, and that person might really like that grant. So, long-term funding. Commit to this process, start building it in. Do it kind of in the background. Care less at the beginning. It is hard. It's the hardest thing. This is why I was telling before we jumped on is that I get yelled at a lot by artists being like, you at the CCA never want to fund stuff like my work. And it's like, breathe. I understand. I understand. It's so important to you. The work that you do is so important and it does deserve funding. And I bet the people who are trying to give you money are like, I'm so sorry. I just don't have any more money for you. Try not to keep that personal feeling of I deserve and I must and I need. You gotta relax, because then once the money starts falling in, then you can start changing your attitude about, okay, what can I start to rely on year over year? But that is way into the future. So consider and think deep inside yourself. Is this something I can do? Is this something I can commit to? And then commit to this long term. Maybe let's start with a year. For one whole year, you're going to look at a bunch of different grants. PD, creation, research and creation, and concept to realization are three ones that you should all be kind of eligible for in your lives, and write those grants. Just do them badly. Do them badly. That's fine. You don't have a project. It doesn't matter. You're fine. And then next year, do three more and then add another one. Oh, what's this over here? Just really figure out what those limits are. Sometimes you can do 2 per year. Research and creation is 2 per year. Same with professional development. Concept to realization, where there's a product at the end, is 1 per year, which is tricky. But yeah, long term, temper those expectations and settle into the process. If this is not for you, know that and get out. And because some people's strength is in fundraising and in sponsorships. Some people like, Steph, that's ballsy, going just calling up. So that's amazing. Some people have that skill where they do that. If your skill is that, shift gears and do that. Know yourself and what you think is feasible. Then, of course, hire somebody like me to come and look it over. There's a lot of different kinds of help that is available. Not just me. I know I just did that, but
Oh, hi, Laura. She's the best.
it could be
wrote
anything.
notes. I said, when you said, oh, if granting is not for you, I wrote, then hi, Laura. She's great.
Yeah, I can take a lot of the load of why this is so frustrating, but what I can't take from you, like what I can't offload from you is how frustrating it is to not get this funding. That really needs to be a mindset set change. However, somebody to help you with the grant writing, either a professional grant writer like myself or somebody else in the industry, is very valuable in just translating what's going on. I also, because I've been doing this for a number of years, I know what the interface is. I know what the question is asking, which is a cheat sheet. I know kind of off the top of my head what the deadlines are, what the limits are, and There's a lot of reading to go along with all of this stuff, but the only reason I know that is because I keep doing more grants. So as you, as an individual, roll along, you're going to start having this information just in the back of your head and go, oh, no, that doesn't, oh, and then that other thing. You're going to have what I have. So I'd love to start people off on their journey and then just let them go, because it doesn't really benefit me artistically to continue to help somebody who can do this themselves. So start off early. Maybe you need a little bit more support, and then slowly let go and start doing it yourself. You will gain this knowledge. It's not as difficult as it seems, but it is intimidating.
So fun. I love to write a grant and then see how I did, and then throw it to Laura and be like, okay, can you spend an hour on this? Did I hit the criteria? Did I hit the subjects? And she's so great at breaking it down. Okay, Steph, throwing it over to you. Give us some final thoughts on self-funding for budding directors and choreographers.
I think as emerging director choreographers, we have to have a creative side of our brain. We also have to have the analytical to, again, be collaborators and to work with theater companies. So I think being a self-producer allows you to exercise both sides. As Laura said, if you feel you're more creative, find someone to help you with this kind of stuff. Find a partner. And the last thing I was going to say is just don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of starting. I think that's the biggest takeaway. I think the first one is super scary, but then once you've done it, it rolls off you a lot easier.
Laura, do you have any final words for our peeps?
My entire artistic career changed when I decided I was going to do it myself. The power, the creation, it changed my life. So you can do it.
Taking it back into our own hands, and there's so little that we get to control as artists, and sometimes our finances are waiting on whether or not we got the job, but it doesn't have to be like that. So it's just changing our mindset. It's such a brilliant thing and such an empowering thing to do. So going back from some of the brilliant things that we learned today, Laura said, get feedback from grants, allow one grant to lead into another, get writing and burst open what is possible. Steph said, self-funding is essential. It makes you a better collaborator. It can bring ideas into fruition, and it will help you articulate your why, and it develops critical skills and problem solving, which is essential for everything that we're trying to do as artists as well. Laura and Steph both talked about deciphering the details of your grants. Uncovering these in advance will help make a successful grant. Knowing your who, what, when, where, and why as an artist is so important for your grant writing. Play the numbers game, keep writing those grants, keep going after those goals, and keep dreaming big. Think long game and articulate your why. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Stephanie Graham and Laura Piccinin. Thank you so much, ladies.
This podcast was made possible by Canada Council for the Arts and brought to you by the Canadian Guild of Stage Directors and Choreographers. CGDC advocates for the rights, interests, and protection of professional stage directors, choreographers, and their assistants and associates.
To learn more, give them a follow on Insta at official CGDC or check out their website, cgdcweb.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, give us a review, a like, or a follow. And if you have any questions or queries about today's episode, please shoot us an email over at canadianguilddc@gmail.com. Thanks for helping us build better pathways and being a part of our community.